How are we doing today? We're great. Yeah, excited to chat. So you're the co-founder of Kinetiq, which is a liquid staking protocol on Hyperliquid, and the top DeFi protocol on the chain with over $1.2 billion in TVL, which we love to see. So can you walk us through the founding story of Kinetiq? I'm curious, I guess, both how you got early conviction in Hyperliquid and then ultimately why you decided to go after the liquid staking opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm one of three co-founders. Our team is now 15, half of which are technical, half operational and more front-facing. And yeah, I mean, everyone's been sourced, at least 99 or 98% of us from this community, if you will. A couple years ago, came across Hyperliquid now, yeah, just over 2 years. May of 2023, accidentally stumbled upon a podcast that somehow still has less than 10,000 views, where Jeff, I think this was the first podcast, Jeff talks about Hyperliquid, and I think his first one in general. And anyway, I mean, I would definitely be lying if I said any of us knew even a fraction of what Hyperliquid would become. But the reality is, um, a couple of us got to get pretty intimate with Hyperliquid in a couple of different ways, and I remember vividly thinking to myself, is it worth going and joining another Discord? And then it made it harder by needing an invite code since closed alpha was going on. So people happily obliged, and from there, the rest is kind of history, where April 2024 was a very interesting turning point. The new custom consensus mechanism was announced and implemented 2 weeks after that. Hyper EVM was announced. We didn't know it would launch 10 months later. The first two HIPs were announced, which, yeah, this is really the beginning and kind of the foundation, if you will, of Kinetiq, and have been pretty much an exclusive user of Hyperliquid since then. No centralized exchanges, no other dexes. Not like I'm some sort of massive trader myself, but I do a little bit of degenerate maximum leverage gambling, and that's where all that happens. And yeah, so obviously, like the cool part was the different approaches between the few of us that began Kinetiq, and I'm just like of the type that's like, if there's 50x leverage, why use 49, right? So you're just leaving that extra multiplier. So, and then on the other side, some of the others would be way more passive, right? And just be like, oh, like, could get to use this platform to generate yield off of traders like myself, who would then lose money on the platform, right? So yeah, we got to know it from every angle, right? And a little bit around the end of summer, so about this time actually last year, we were getting familiar with a couple of teams that had been announced, and all of them were money markets at the time. And the idea of Kinetiq was overall spun up before a token was even announced, funny enough. And yeah, again, you could probably say that was a pretty ridiculous bet, but here we are. And yeah, nonetheless, the point being is that we figured there was a very interesting opportunity to use all of our collective expertise on the developmental side across other liquid staking protocols historically, combined across our whole team. The understandings, given that we're just DeFi junkies ourselves, the understanding of what makes a really good LST a good LST, right? And then yeah, essentially Kinetiq was born, and obviously Hyperliquid TVE occurred, which is great. But here we are. I mean, we just went live July 15th, so almost, well, actually to the day, 5 weeks ago, and we've become the fastest growing liquid staking protocol ever, which we're very proud of. And it took a couple people pointing that out, so we were just like, wow, okay. Um, and yeah, of course, on Hyperliquid, it's been really, really fun. We quickly became the dominant LST there. I mean, we are for the ecosystem. Kinetiq will only ever exist on Hyperliquid. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the few things that make it what it is. And yeah, about 80% of all LST market share on Kinetiq right now, which has been fun. And yeah, the idea now is further accelerating K-Hype usage across all of DeFi. But yeah, that's the very high level intro.
So what makes a good LST a good LST?
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, this is a very straightforward story, right? That at the end of the day, it's about maximizing the opportunity that people have to use the LST in DeFi. So this was what we spent nearly a year essentially just sleeping, eating, and thinking about. And yeah, like, so that was the real question around why did Kinetiq have such an explosive launch? And the reason was, so many people must have been so tired of hearing from us that they should be integrating K-Hype on the platform, that when it finally came time to do that, it finally came through, right? So this was the main thing. And on top of that, given the unique nature of Hyperliquid as an application first, and more specifically an exchange, there's so much that can be done with an LST as a whole. And this is what we've been focused on building K-Hype around. First, it is, of course, I guess you could say, you think of it as a lot of a Trojan horse kind of approach, where the reality is the economics of an LST are never usually great. Even the largest liquid staking protocols run at a loss. But given what you can do on Hyperliquid, Kinetiq is very, very poised to do very, very different things for LSTs and really break the mold, if you will. So yeah, I mean, these are the main things I would say. There was a ton of pent-up demand for using the hype in DeFi in a really interesting and more DeFi savvy and familiar way. K-Hype has been the second fastest growing market on Pendle in 5 weeks, which is just ridiculous. We're insanely proud of that, and Pendle team super stoked for this. And yeah, now only second to Athena, essentially, on the platform as far as usage. So this has been really cool. But yeah, like these things are what makes an LST ultimately. Just a ridiculous amount of usage. You could do everything with K-Hype, from LP it to trade the yield on it and everything in between. You could even write covered calls on it. I mean, just ridiculous what you could do already. And we just expect this to further accelerate. So we've even created an institutional offering. We now have a DeFi element baked into the platform, which has become the largest vault on Hyperliquid by Hype and USD terms. So just all these different little pieces that make it what it is today. I mean, and doing this without any sort of under the table side deal nonsense and private stuff that has just been making that all much sweeter, right? That people organically really want to use this thing.
Yeah, so you recently announced launch by Kinetiq, which you described as the Shopify cross Kickstarter for exchanges. So, I mean, I'm deeply fascinated by HIP3. So, wondering if you could tell us why you're excited by that, which ultimately unlocks this opportunity, and then what this launch by Kinetiq product kind of unlocks for builders.
Yeah, I'm very much an appreciator of people that say HIP, because I know a lot of people say HIP now, so it's like HIP3 or HIP this, HIP that, and I'm in the HIP camp, so
Let's
HIP3
go.
for the win. But yeah, so HIP3, I've talked about this quite a lot. Is an industry defining development for Hyperliquid and overall for crypto in general. And this is just again something that is very much misunderstood. A high level of HIP3 is that any aspiring exchange deployer can source 1 million hype however they choose, whether it's privately, if they have a million hype, or through something like an LST, if you will, and effectively deploy an exchange on top of Hyperliquid's battle tested architecture. So the chain itself, right? This means you don't tap into any of Hyperliquid's existing liquidity. You don't tap into HLP, and this is like a big thing for deployers. This is always the question: it's like, what do you get from Hyperliquid for this $40+ million that you need to stake, right? And the reality is nothing except the actual underlying technology by which to deploy your own exchange and do whatever the hell you want. So today, there are so many different types of aspiring deployers using HIP3. So whether it's stablecoin issuers or money markets or front ends that want to run their own, I guess you could say, exotic perps through equities or commodities, FX, rates, bonds, you name it, right? Everybody is really interested in doing something in some way, shape, or form on HIP3. And what's really missing since the announcement has been some sort of cohesive glue between all of the different types of individuals that are interested in HIP3 in some way, shape, or form. It's really today a buzzword for a lot of people. So we are making a huge effort in ensuring that people actually understand what this is. And more importantly, we're actually lowering the cost to entry by a lot, right? So our idea ultimately is that people of any kind, whether you're the most retail of retail or the most institutional of institutional, you should be able to back any exchange that wants to be launched through HIP3. And the launch platform essentially will allow people to do that. So you'll be able to effectively say, hypothetically, Seed Club wanted to launch its own seed exchange, right? And you wanted to launch, I don't know, any kind of perp for anything. It could literally be on the weather in Los Angeles or the valuation of a company, right? You could do that using HIP3. And the most important part being aligned with the Hyperliquid ethos, anybody can join you in backing this exchange. So instead of you guys needing to source 1 million hype by yourselves, which after talking with dozens of teams, this is the biggest problem. You'll be able to source it from the community, and the people can essentially back you if they want to or not, right? So this has been the most interesting part of the launch equation. And for deployers, they would receive what we call an XLST, which effectively uses the architecture that we've now deployed our LST with and have secured, quadruple audits, and will continue to audit on. It's shown it's been able to handle 10 figures of deposits. The idea being that people can come in and configure this LST that is unique to their exchange. And it doesn't conflict with any existing LST because it is an LST with the underlying height that earns the staking yield and the exchange yield specifically. So many cool composable things can be done in DeFi with this. It's a huge primitive. HIP3 itself is already, and like new things that are being built on top, such as launch, make it even more, constructive to niche DeFi stuff. So yeah.
I'm curious about niche DeFi stuff because I think it's so we see so much copying, right? And the generally speaking, and yet I think most who are deep in the space are believe that there's some new form factor, new context, new user experience that's really going to be the thing that kind of takes the next breakout exchange into sort of popularity. So what are you seeing? What are you excited about? What are the weird things that people are talking about in your world?
I think so like one of my I guess you could say things that keep me up at night in the most exciting way possible is, ecosystems or networks as a whole, especially when it comes to proof of stake, are used to emitting extremely high amounts of emissions that make staking for network security really attractive. Whereas on Hyperliquid, it's actually extremely low. It's like 2.2% roughly. So this gives opportunities for not only LST protocol like Kinetiq, but eventually what we would allow for with LST issuers through these exchange deployments to effectively do is have a really nice incentive to actually drive way more yield to their token holders, or by token holder, I mean literally the LST holders, the people that back these exchanges, than the native staking yield. And this becomes a very competitive dynamic between all types of exchanges, LSTs themselves, right? So you just add one more layer to what can be feeding an LST from a yield perspective. And you do it in a way where you don't have friction via the native network emitting way more in tokens than you would be able to earn in yield, right? So it makes it really exciting. It provides a very interesting ground floor kind of opportunity for deployers who are really confident in their ability for their exchanges to make money, to drive a ridiculous amount of yield to their token holders. And I think we start to see very interesting things. Like my wildest dreams for launch is that you have an exchange that's so successful that people are willing to pay a premium for the LST to essentially join in on this exchange, because most people are not going to be interested in getting out of it, right? Because if you can generate 50% APY holding one specific exchange's LST that is capped versus holding something that just generates a native staking yield, now you have a really interesting dynamic happening, right? It's like, the medallion fund of Renaissance, right? Like anybody would pay a ridiculous premium to get into that, right? Which is literally impossible. So the idea around exchange ownership is probably similar, or should be similar to an extent. I mean, it's the same thing with any exchange, right? You'd probably pay prior to Coinbase IPOing, you'd probably pay to be a part owner in Coinbase and pay quite a premium for that, right? So that's kind of the idea in terms of what my wildest aspirations for that are, and then several like very composable parts of what can be done with these types of LSTs and DeFi after.
Do you see these like fee accruing LSTs almost as a replacement to like an exchange platform token? Because like functionally they're kind of similar, right? Like Hype uses fees to buy back the token, but conversely they could just direct that to stakers.
That's an extremely interesting point, actually. Like the reality is, yes, in a decentralized world where the underlying exchanges are run on blockchain, and particularly on Hyperliquid, you have this dynamic that's actually possible. Whereas with a centralized exchange, it literally doesn't make any sense to drive the fee share anywhere, and they don't even drive it to the token in this particular case; they just drive it to themselves, as in the actual exchange's bottom line, rather than token holders. Token holders just obviously get to speculate on how much, I guess you could say, crime an exchange will commit in terms of like what kind of supply dynamics are at play, and how much they're willing to quote unquote burn that they minted themselves. Like it's just very weird, right? So on chain and through decentralized exchanges and decentralized rails by which to do this, things get very interesting. And like you said, Josh, like the very interesting dynamics can occur where the revenue can literally just be split between the deployer, the LST holder, which is literally anyone from the open market, whether it's an institution or retail, and of course the infrastructure provider like Kinetiq. So yeah.
All right. Last question. I'm going back to maybe your answer to the first question here. Who sent you the link to that podcast? Because I have a similar story in how I discovered Ethereum, and it was just like a blessing from the YouTube algorithm gods. But
yeah, right.
How do you find that so early?
So that's a good question. It was a very boring time in the market ultimately, and one of my co-founders, Magnus, at the time, he was very like I guess immersed in the world of quantitative finance, and there's a podcast called Flirting with Models, and he was an avid listener of that, and essentially that came up on his algo one day, and he's like, "Yo, you should probably check this out." Then we both ended up listening to it the same day. We both like listened to it a couple of times, and actually I listen to it every few months, and I'm still blown away. Like that's actually the deepest I think I've ever heard Jeff go on a podcast, which is why I'm very surprised it's still under 10,000 views. So found it by complete accident, just like you with Ethereum.
Send it over here because we'd love to share.
I'll send it. I'll send it over. Yeah,
it seems like high praise. All right, man, we're gonna have to leave it there.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Really wonderful to see that. Excuse me, that just the growth you guys have had there, and we love seeing people make early bets before it's obvious and for it to pay off here. So congrats on all the success.
Appreciate it.
To see what's next.
Thanks, guys.
Love to check back in with you again in the future.
For sure. Chat soon, guys. Thank you.
Peace.
All right, take care.